Shalom from Jerusalem. I'm Avi Ben Mordechai. We are on location south of Jerusalem, overlooking what is called the Temple Mount. That is the entire complex from 3,000 years ago when King Solomon built the first Beit HaMikdash, or the house of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. He built it on top of this entire mount that we see here behind me. This is the Beit HaMikdash and the entire complex that was put here by David's son Solomon over 3,000 years ago. Not only that, but also it was destroyed, as you will learn from history, by King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, and then it was restored by the Shavei Sion returnees from Babylon, okay? They came back and restored parts of it, but it was refurbished and rebuilt again by King Herod of Judea. King Herod was of Idumean descent, but he was known because of his conversion from his family side. His family had converted to Judaism way back before he was born, and therefore he was also considered Jewish. However, his background was Idumean, or of Esav, okay? But we can talk more about this later. Now, let's look at the scenery that we're understanding here as we're looking off here to your left and, of course, here to your right. Okay, your left and your right both are going to be showing some very interesting things, and we'll study these here on the program here. First of all, what are we looking at exactly? In the scenery, we are going to be seeing the Mount of Olives to your right. The Mount of Olives is here to your right. This is an ancient mountain. It goes back a long time in all of the history of the Torah, the prophets, and the writings. So this is called the Mount of Olives. It's an ancient graveyard. This graveyard is so old, it has hundreds of thousands of graves on it. It has hundreds of thousands of people that have died all through the centuries, and certainly it has a lesson to teach us today about redemption. Not only is Har Ezeitim, or the Mount of Olives, in the scene, but behind me also we have another scene. We have that of what is called the Beit HaMikdash, or the entire Temple Mount complex that King Solomon built at the command of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, because he was the son of King David, okay? And he built that as well. We'll see that in 1 Kings chapter 8. And then further over here to your left, you're going to see another scene. This is the old city of Jerusalem. And the old city goes back into the days of the King Herod and the Romans, and the upper city, which was the priestly part of the city of Jerusalem. And then as you go further to the left, further to the west, then you're going to run into the modern city of Jerusalem as well, okay? So this is kind of our orientation. So what are you looking at here? You are looking north, directly behind me. Over to your right, you're looking to the east. Over to your left, you're going to be looking over here to the west. So we are to the south of Jerusalem, on a hill, on a mountain top that is called Armon HaNatziv, the Palace of the Great Commissioner, during what's called the British Mandate period, okay, which ended on May 14th, 1948. Let's take a look further in what we're examining here to understand what we need to do and how to relate to the covenant of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. Now, there's a couple of things that we need to pay attention to, first of all, and that is the idea that, first of all, a vocabulary, okay? When you and I, when we read through our Bibles together, you will see the words in English or in whatever language you are using. You'll see the equivalent of the word Lord. Keep in mind that Lord or the Lord, okay, is a pagan concept. And we prefer to use the Hebrew idea, either Adonai, which shows up many times in the Tanakh, the Torah, the prophets, and the writings, or we prefer, of course, to use Yud-He, Vav-He, or you could also be pronouncing it as Yud-He, Wah-He. Yud-He, Vav-He, Yud-He, Wah-He. Different pronunciations of the way people speak. Yud-He, Vav-He are the Hebrew letters that appear in the Hebrew Tanakh, the Hebrew Torah, at Exodus chapter 3, verses 14 through 16. And that is, Yud-He, Vav-He is kind of a shortened version, an abbreviated version of the longer term that Yud-He, Vav-He told Moshe to tell the people when he said, "Who do I say sent me?" And he says, Yud-He, Vav-He says, "Tell them, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh has sent you. Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh." Translated loosely, I was, I am, and I will be. Past, present, future tense. Goes along very nicely with the idea that he is the same yesterday, today, and forever, just as it says in the Brit Hadashah in the book of Hebrews. He was, he is, he will be. He is everything. He is all sufficient. The name Yud-He, Vav-He comes from Exodus chapter 3, verses 14 through 16. You can study that on your own. You'll understand that Hebrew concept. It appears, 6, 7, 8,000 times in the Hebrew Tanakh? So you can understand this by looking at his name. But I would suggest to you that you don't use the name Lord or God. God is another one of those pagan ideas, pagan terms that comes from the Teutonic Knights and perhaps even before then, a long time ago, 1,000 years ago or more. Okay? God is another one of those terms that is pagan. We would prefer to use it in the Hebrew and say Elohim. Elohim. That is a much more accurate term, and it refers to something very specific in your Hebrew Bible. Okay? So the terms we'll be using here is Elohim, Yud-He, Vav-He, and we will also be using other ideas to help express these concepts, like the word law in English or in any other language is the Hebrew Torah. Okay? So we'll be using the word Torah. And this idea comes from the 5 books of Moses: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, the 5 books of Moshe. And then following the Torah, we have the prophets. And the prophets are the major prophets and the minor prophets. People like Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah, Isaiah, Yeshayahu, Ezekiel, Yehezkel. Then you have some of the minor prophets, people like Zechariah, Hosea, Amos, Habakkuk, people like that, okay? And those make up the parts of the prophets. And then we have, of course, the writings. And the writings are people like David and Solomon, who wrote the Psalms, the Proverbs. And actually, it is Yeshua in the Brit Hadashah, not Jesus, but Yeshua, okay? So we come over here to Luke chapter 24, verse 44, and this is what it says. Then he, referring to Yeshua, spoke to them, referring to the Talmudim or the disciples. These are the words which I spoke to you while I was still with you, that all things must be fulfilled which were written in the law of Moses, the prophets, and the Psalms, or the writings, concerning me. And he opened their minds, he opened their understanding that they might comprehend the scriptures. So this is the whole idea. Yeshua is referring to the Torah, the law of Moses, the prophets, and the writings, all 3 of them. And it's called Tanakh. It's an acronym. Tanakh, Torah, prophets, writings. So with all of these references, Yeshua was quite familiar with the whole idea of the law of Moses, the prophets, and the Psalms, and the Proverbs, and these kinds of writings that help us to understand these things, okay? So now what we want to do is we want to go, and while we're on location, let's take a look and understand what it is we're looking at in our background. Again, let's go back to the idea of the Mount of Olives. The Mount of Olives plays a significant role. Har HaZitim plays a significant role in all of Hebrew thought and Hebrew ideas. It plays a significant role. Let's turn here to the prophet Zechariah. Zechariah, chapter 14. Let's go to there together in the Tanakh, and let's take a look at this and understand what it is we're looking at. Okay? Zechariah the prophet. In that day, his feet will stand on Har HaZitim, the Mount of Olives, which faces Yerushalayim, or Jerusalem, on the east. And Har HaZitim, the Mount of Olives, shall be split in two, from east to west. Understand the orientation. You're looking north. We're south of the mountain right now. To your right, is the Mount of Olives. This mountain is going to split in two. According to the prophecy of Zechariah, half of it is going to go to the north. That's away from you. Half of it's going to come to the south, towards you. And this entire mountain is going to be splitting in two. And do you know what's going to happen? A gigantic chasm of valley will open up here in the midst of this gigantic mountain called Har HaZitim. And when that opens up, we are going to have an earthquake. And it says it'll make a very large valley. And it says you are going to flee through this mountain valley, and the mountain valley shall reach to Azal. Azal is down below us here, directly here off your screen, okay? So this is going to be the area of the Mount of Olives. Now, this is the Mashiach, the Messiah, the Mashiach of Israel, the promised Redeemer of Israel, the one who has brought the Torah of Moshe to us. He is the one that is going to stand on the Mount of Olives with his feet. He's going to descend. It's interesting that this is the very same place that he took off from, that he ascended in the book of Acts, chapter 1. When, after the whole resurrection scenario, he was the one that ascended the mountain, on top of the mountain. And that's going to be a separate program in and of itself, and you will understand the whole context of that. But the ascension and the coming back down to touch his feet on the Mount of Olives, this is HaMashiach who's going to do this. That's going to be on the Mount of Olives here on location. It's going to happen here. Let's go to Luke 21:37. Luke in the Brit Hadashah 21:37. Now here we have this particular word being spoken to us here. In the daytime, he, referring to Yeshua, was teaching in the Beit HaMikdash, that is, the temple or the house. He was actually in the courtyard, directly behind us, where the gold dome is located. In that general area, he was standing up there, he was teaching, he was speaking, he was preaching. We'll talk about the content of his words in just a moment. He was teaching in the temple, but at night, he went out and stayed on the mountain called Olivet. Where is Olivet? Again, to your right. It's the big mountain that faces Jerusalem on the east. And that mountain plays an important role in all of Jewish history, all of Israelite history, biblical history with the Tanakh. Then early in the morning, all the people came to him in the house to hear him. What was Yeshua teaching on this platform that is behind us? He was walking around up there. In fact, he ascended the very steps to the south of the platform. You can see that on your screen here. Here it is here. He is ascended the steps going up to the house. He had to go on those steps, and we'll show you some images of that here, okay? So what exactly was he teaching when he walked up on these steps, according to Luke chapter 21, verse 37? Let's go to Matthew 5, and we'll learn what he was teaching. And let's go to verse 17. Yeshua says, "Do not think I came to destroy the law or the prophets. I didn't come to destroy, but to fulfill." Now the concept of fulfilling, even in the Greek, the Hebrew, whatever, The concept of fulfilling is that of filling up to the full. Take a glass of water. Take a glass of juice. Take something on your table. Fill it up and keep filling it until it overflows. Until it overflows on the table. You'll make a nice mess, but it's going to teach you a lesson. That's the idea of filling up. It's called fulfilling. Filling up, overflowing. This is the idea in Mattityahu 5:17. Don't think I came to destroy the Torah or the prophets. No, no, no. I came to fill it up to the full, to overflow the teachings, to bring them to an understanding. And then he goes on to say in verse 18, assuredly I say to you, and I'm reading from the New King James Version. It reads pretty much the same no matter what translation you have. For assuredly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, well, heaven and earth hasn't passed away. I'm still sitting here in the sunlight of Jerusalem, so we still have it here. Not one little yud or jot or tittle will by no means pass from the Torah, even until it is all filled up. The Hebrew idea is ad. Ad. Okay, this is Ein Daled in Hebrew. Ad refers to this idea of even until. In other words, even you go that far, and still it will not go away. Even until that point, it will not go away. No. Even until the Torah is all filling up, overflowing. That's the concept in a Hebrew mindset. Remember, we're thinking Hebraic. You're honoring a Jew, my friends. Your Yeshua is a Jew. He was a Yehudi from Israel. And he walked here, behind us here on this complex, this complex that King Solomon built and later King Herod came and refurbished. He was right here in this land. Not just him, but King David and Solomon. Oh, even going back to Abraham and all the kings. I'm telling you, they've all been here. This is the beauty of being here in Eretz Israel. And then verse 19 of Matthew 5 says, whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches men so, okay, they shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. Least in the kingdom. You want to be least? In other words, you want to be a pimple in the kingdom of heaven? You want to be nothing? Well, then go on and continue doing what you're doing. You'll be nothing, all right. But whoever does and teaches what? The Torah of Moshe, Moses. Or as we say, Moshe ben Amram. Moses of the days of Exodus? Yes. He'll be called great in the kingdom. I say to you that unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. Well, they were pretty righteous, weren't they? The scribes and Pharisees were keeping ritual purity laws, kosher laws, the dietary laws. They were keeping festival laws and this law and that law. Boy, they had laws for everything. And they were being absolutely, totally perfect in everything that they were doing. Oh. Can you surpass that? Yes. How so? By doing the written Torah. By doing the written Torah. What were they doing? They were doing a man-made religion called Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral law. Because they were doing oral tradition, oral law, that passed down by their previous sages, their previous rabbis. They weren't doing the Torah. Let me show you how I understand this in brief. John chapter 7, and we're going to verse 16. Yeshua was talking to the scribes and Pharisees of his day. My doctrine is not mine, but his who sent me. Oh, that's something interesting. We'll look at that in a moment. If anyone wills to do his will, he will know concerning the doctrine whether it is from Elohim or whether I speak of my own authority. He who speaks from himself seeks his own glory, but he who seeks the glory of the one who sent him is true. And no unrighteousness is in him. And then look at 7:19 in the book of Yochanan. Did not Moses give you the Torah? Did not Moses give you the Torah? And yet none of you keeps the Torah? Oh, really? He's speaking to scribes and Pharisees, and he says, none of you keeps the Torah? That's right. They were keeping something else, a man-made religion. So he jumps all over him and says, you're not keeping the Torah. And he says, so why are you seeking to kill me? Why seek to kill him? I'll show you why. Let's go to the book of Matthew, Matityahu, and we'll go over here to chapter 23, and you'll understand why they were seeking to kill him. Matthew chapter 23, come over here to verse 37. And keep this in mind, we're on location in Jerusalem where all this happened. Oh, Yerushalayim, Yerushalayim, Matthew 23, 37. The one who kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to her. Didn't Yeshua just say, didn't he say, I was sent? Yes, he was sent. So, the one who kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to her. How often I wanted to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you were not willing. Oh, no. It says you were not willing. It doesn't say you were not able, life was too difficult, you couldn't figure it out, oh, it was too hard to keep the law. No. You were not willing. See, your house is left to you desolate. Let's now ascend the platform.